Hello and welcome to BusyWorksBeats.com. If you don't know me, I'm Game from BusyWorksBeats.com. We've trained over 1 million producers around the world. Some have gone to work with Drake, Kanye West, Post Malone, Ariana Grande, French Montana, Young Thug, Polo G, Trippie Redd, Lil Baby, J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar. A long list of artists. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. So today we're going to cover the music theory that's essential for music producers. And we're going to cover 7 specific things. I have a list so I don't get off track. And it is storming, so if you guys hear thunderous stuff, smash the like button every time you hear thunder. Firstly, I'm going to show you guys how to convert your major scale to a minor scale. Very important because every major scale is basically also a minor scale. I'm also going to show you guys an infinite chord progression secret you guys can use. Even if you're a beginner, you can copy this formula. It always works. I'm going to cover the 4 components of composition, which is essential to all of this working. You have to understand how to build on music theory. I'm going to cover the importance of tonic to dominant, the relationship between those 2 chord types. We're going to go over modes for like R&B if you guys are trying to get into R&B. I'm going to cover tuning, which is the secret behind like Party Next Door and Drake's type stuff. And then lastly, the 7-note system I've created for melody. So we have a lot to cover here. Firstly, I just want to give you guys courage to say, look, I could take this simple chord here, this 5-note chord, D-F-A-C-E, and then I can simply move my fingers around to create different chords. So this is not a take notes section. I just want you guys to listen. So here we have minor. And what if we do the Pharrell thing and, raise our 3rd and our 7th to where now it's a major chord. Now, I'm not going to be like that college professor who just talks to you in 3rds and 5ths and minor this and flat 5 this because you don't understand the language yet. And if you guys want like a course that goes way deeper into this stuff, I have way over 5 hours of stuff. Go to BusyWorksBeats.com and look for the music theory bundle because in there I have all my music theory courses where I spend way more time going through every single thing so that you're not confused. For this video, I have to be a little short, just giving you guys a realistic. Now, what if we go from D minor and then we do a sharp 3rd or raise the 3rd up, but then we flatten our 7th. Now we get a whole different vibe. So now they're going in opposite directions. Now what if we do weird stuff like sharpening our 5th and our 9th? Now we get a suspended chord. What if we sharpen that 3rd too? Now we get a really cool chord called a dominant chord, which is an altered chord. And all I'm thinking about is like each note of this chord, I'm just saying, am I going to move it up 1 or down 1? Okay, without doing too much. And this is the cool thing. When you guys truly understand music theory, you can get into stuff like that where your chords sound really lush and it gives a vibe without you having to start down here, move your hands way over here, come back. You're just moving like 1 finger at a time. First thing we need to cover is the minor and major scale. So firstly, the minor scale, before you get into anything, if you're in FL Studio, I'd recommend you go to the top left here where it says piano roll options, go to view, and then go to where it says keyboard labels, go to all notes. Without this, it's going to be very difficult to produce from sideways perspective. So everybody associates major with happiness or upwardness, and they associate minor with darkness or downwardness, which does make sense when you think about the relationship between these two. Let's start with the most basic scale of all time. It's all the white notes. Okay, we're going to start at what's called C. Now, even if you don't know the notes, you'll get used to these by these like the way the black notes are. So don't think you have to memorize everything just yet. What we're going to do is just map out all the white notes starting at C. This is called C major. Okay, and that is the simple definition. Now we associate major with happiness. So it's not really the true definition. Happiness is really an upward movement and sadness is more of a downward movement. So if I go down, does that sound sad or happy? Sounds kind of sad. Okay, it's because I'm going down. So happiness is not necessarily major or minor. I think that's a generalization, but for this explanation, it will matter. What we can do here is for every major scale, you have what's called a minor scale. So think of it like your personality. You have the person you put in the front, and then you have that dark side when people anger you. Okay, so what we're going to do is understand that everything is duality when it comes to major and minor. And when you have a major scale, it's also a minor scale. So it's actually more than one scale in one. We can get into the particulars, but I'll make this short. So again, let's think of major scales as happy. Now, what happens if I go to what's called the relative minor scale? How do we even achieve the relative minor scale? The simple way, take your major scale, which is happy, and there's thunder, so I need you guys to smash that like button. Take your root note here, C, and then we're going to count down 3 notes. Okay, so let's just count down 3 notes, every single note down. 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to start 3 notes down, and we're going to map out the same exact notes that we played for the C major scale. In this case, it's all the white notes. So we're going to go down 3 and then count the same exact notes here. So here we're going to start at A this time, B, C, D, E, and then it goes all the way up to A. So that's how you easily convert your major scale to your minor relative scale. What does that mean? I'll give you guys an example. So you could do stuff like this. This is a C major 9th chord. You don't have to memorize this just yet. And then we could do what's called a 2-5-1. Oops, that was my mistake. So let's do C. And let's just do an altered chord. Okay, so that's how we can create what's called the tonic to dominant. Okay, so I'm kind of using a very advanced jazz theory technique here. Now, what happens if I want to go out of key and I want to go to the A natural minor scale? I could do that by taking what's called the 2, the 5, and the 1 of the minor scale. But it all feels cohesive because I understand how to move from the major to the minor. I'll do that one more time. So here's C, and then we have the 2nd of C, altered 5th, and then back to the root note of C. Again, we got thunder. I need you guys to smash that like button. Now let's do a 2-5-1 starting from the A natural minor position. We just moved over to the A natural minor scale without you even knowing or feeling that something changed. And that's the cool part about jazz theory, music theory in general. When I show you guys the importance of tonic to dominant, okay, so what I'm trying to tell you guys is you can seamlessly move from this to this without anybody noticing. All right, more thunder we got. And this is how you take people on a musical journey. Okay, so now that you understand what scales basically are a sequence of notes that somebody liked. That's the general rough definition of what a scale is. Modes are scales. Okay, the C major scale is a scale. The minor scale is a scale. The Phrygian mode is a scale. It's just a sequence of notes with different gaps in between the notes that somebody said, okay, I'm going to play these notes in this order. That's it. So don't overcomplicate scales. A lot of people like to associate moods with scales. I think it's partially true because, again, you could have a happy vibe with C major, and you can also have a sadder vibe, just depending on how you go about moving through those notes. Okay, so now you understand the basics of the colors, we'll say, that make up the sound. Now let's move into how do you create chords. Now, chords is what every producer wants to skip because they feel like chords have no purpose in modern music. I can tell you guys, if you want the yeet sound, let me just show you how fast we can get to the yeet sound. This is called harmony. We're going to take the note F, count up 5 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to take this note, duplicate it, pull it down. And this is called quartal harmony. I'm just showing you guys little techniques. All we got to do is copy it. So let's hit Shift, copy. And just make that top note the note we want. Now what separates yeet sound from Playboi Carti's older rage sound, you're going to take this note, pull it up 2 more. So now the distance here is 7 notes. This is called quintal harmony. Used more in like rock. So when people tell me music theory is not used in modern music, you know, it's a misnomer. Okay, so let's use the C major scale here, all the white notes starting from C, and let's create our first chord progression. Now I'm going to be very simple about this, but it goes deeper in my course material, but we have to be short for this video. And also, I don't know if the power is going to go out. Okay, so we're going to take this first note here. This is called the tonic. This is the home note. This is kind of where our ear says, okay, I want to go back to this note. So wherever you start the scale, this is usually where it wants to go back to. That's a generalization though. Okay, so firstly, let's just start with the root notes and not the harmonies of these notes. Harmony would be multiple notes playing at once. And I say multiple because most people don't know the old definition of a chord was 2 notes or more. Okay, you're taught that chords are 3 notes or more, and that's probably why you guys struggle with music theory, is because you can have harmony with 2 notes or more. Okay, and the old definition of a chord was 2 notes or more. So when you really think about it, you're like, oh, that's what a chord is. It makes so much more sense. Okay, So what we're going to do here is take C, and let's say you don't know where to go to next. Now we're going to talk what are called scale degrees. I have another system called chord codes, which I will teach you guys. This wasn't in my notes, but I'm going to add this in. But I have a whole course specifically about chord codes. But I'll teach you guys chord codes only after you learn what are called scale degrees. The difference here is scale degrees is a relative system, and you need a scale in order to use scale degrees. Chord codes, another system I teach, you do not need a scale to make a chord. And that's the huge difference, okay? So when we're talking about scale degrees, we speak in the, with a suffix. So it's like first, third, fifth. Okay, there's something at the end of the number. Okay, so here we're going to take the first note in the scale. Then you have the second note, the third note, the fourth note, the fifth note, the sixth note, the seventh note, and then back to the root note here. Now, the reason I'm emphasizing the suffix is because a lot of lazy teachers, they just call it the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4. But that's a lazy way to talk because this is all a relative system, and I don't want people to confuse chord codes with scale degrees. Long story short, this stuff is called the first, the second, the third, the fourth, because it's the fourth note of a scale. So people say, okay, I understand a scale. It's a sequence of notes that somebody likes, okay, and then it makes a specific mood. Now they're like, okay, how do you create chords? What you can do is start at each scale degree. Let's just start here at the first, and you simply skip every other note in the scale to create what's called a triad. Tri meaning 3, like trident gum. Okay, so we're going to take C, and we're going to skip D, go to E, skip F, go to G. This makes your first triad, 3-note chord. But what if you want to make R&B stuff? You want to get more fancy. These are called chord extensions. Anytime we go beyond the simple 3-note chord, we get into very complex music theory, and people call these chord extensions. Let me duplicate the scale here, and let's start here at C. All we're going to do is skip every other note. So we're going to go C, skip D, go to E, skip F, go to G, skip A, go to B, skip C, go to D. This is called a 9th chord, and I'll show you guys why. And this is getting into that R&B lush sound and the jazz sound. So if I had to give you guys a definition, 7th chords would be if I had 4 notes, like here. Now, 7th chords aren't always 4 notes strong. I don't want to complicate things. But let's explain why it's called 7th and 9th chords. Firstly, you have the first scale degree, the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7th. So if I'm building a chord starting here at the root note, and then I'm counting to the third and the fifth, the next logical thing I'm going to get to is called the 7th, okay? So the first, skip the second, go to the third, skip the fourth, go to the fifth, skip the 6th, go to the 7th. And that's why it's called a C major 7th chord. Now, again, when we get into chord codes, you'll understand why this is even called a major chord, okay? Because nobody defines what a major chord actually is, and that's why so many beginners are confused. You think you have to map out a major scale just to make a major chord. It's not the case. Okay, so now that we understand the nomenclature, let's make a 9th chord. What is a 9th chord? It's when you start at your root note, and then you skip, every other note. So we're at the 7th, and you skip the 8th, you go to the 9th scale degree, and you add that in. So that's why it's called the 9th chord. Okay, now the chord type determines what we call it, whether major 9th or minor 9th. You could have both. So again, when we get into chord codes, I'll explain why. Let me just give you guys, because without defining it, I don't want to confuse you moving forward. So now we have to get into a whole different brain frame to say, okay, we're not talking about scale degrees here. We're talking about just numbers. So I can teach anybody how to create any chord. Let me switch screens here and pull up our software here, because I want to show you guys. I can close my eyes. Here's the magic of chord codes. I'm going to close my eyes, pick a note. You don't even need to know what this note is. Okay, so let's say you want to make a minor 9th chord code. There's a chord code for this. So every chord has a DNA to it. And this is the magic that I teach at busyworksbeats.com. And this is what makes me different from every teacher in music theory. Nobody else talks this way. It's my system that I found through struggle and pain. All right, so we have here D. And let's say we want to make the minor 9th chord. So it's 0, 3, 7, 10, 14 is the chord code. So 0 meaning the root note because there's no relative distance. Okay, we're just starting here at the root note. Now we're going to count up note by note until we finish out this chord code. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So as long as you can count, you can do this. 4, 5, 6, 7. Notice I'm not saying 7th. I'm saying 7 because we're counting to the number 7. 8, 9, 10. Okay, and then we got to add that 14 in there. 11, 12, 13, 14. Play all these together. You get a minor 9th chord. I'm literally going to close my eyes and pick a whole different key. I landed on E flat. You guys don't even need to know what that is. Let's make an E flat major 9th chord, which is going to be 0, 4, 7, 11, 14. And I'll give you guys a chord chord code, not chord code, chord code chart for free. Just go to busyworksbeats.com/music theory, or just go to busyworksbeats.com. Actually, it's probably easier, and then sign up and then click on the free downloads tab. Okay, so here we have E flat, and what we want to do here is make that major ninth chord. So it's 0, 4, 7, 11, 14. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Play all these together. We have the E flat major ninth. Now, how do I know that without memorizing any scales? I freestyled this. This was not pre-planned. And now we have this chord type. It's because everything comes down to the intervallic distance between notes. Okay, so I've mapped that out strategically for you guys in what's called chord codes. Okay, so that was just a little example. So I brought that up to say that the reason we know this is a major ninth chord is because this specific triad has a specific DNA to it. It has a chord code. And that chord code is if we start at C and we count up these notes, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that lets me know this is a major triad, or major third, this is called. I don't want to get too deep into music theory talk. And then, so that's 0, 4, 5, 6, 7. And 0, 4, 7 always makes the major chord all of the time. That's the identity of what makes the major chord. So that's how we name this major. And then we, look at what's called the chord extension. I know that was a lot all in one. That's why I said, if you guys want to truly learn more, go to busyworksbeats.com. Look for the music theory bundle. That will guide you way deeper into this stuff. Now, most people ask me, okay, where do you go next in your chords? Okay, so let's start here at what's called the tonic. And let's say you have no idea where to go to next. What I really recommend people do is listen to their ear more than like a technical way to go about it. Your ear will guide you through your taste. But however, let's create a system here. All we're going to do is look at the root note here and then add 3 scale degrees for the next chord. So if I start here at C, we're going to count up 3 more scale degrees. Okay, so scale degrees is a relative system that only works when you have a scale. Okay, so we have the first scale degree, and then we're going to count 3 more scale degrees. 1, 2, 3. That leads us to the F, which is our 4th scale degree. And then again, to create that chord, you start at F, skip G, go to A. And then you skip the notes in the scale. So we have F, skip G, go to A, skip B, go to C, skip, D, go to E. This creates what's called the major 7th chord. And then let's add G, that's a major 9th chord. Okay, now we're producing, an FL Studio, which just makes the velocity all the same. I'm not going to get into the weeds about this, but if you just turn down the velocity for this specific keyscape instrument, it gives you a smoother sound and less of this like stomping on the piano sound. So let's work with this more realistic velocity here. Okay, so now it has that dreamy 80s feel, like a 90s R&B. Okay, now you may ask, okay, where do you go from here? We could just return back to C, or we could do the same thing, which is add 3 scale degrees from F. So let's count from F. We're going to count up 3 scale degrees. 1, 2, 3, and this gives us B. Now, B is a very special note in this specific scale because it doesn't create a major or a minor. It creates what's called a diminished triad. Now, here's where most music theory teachers just make you memorize stuff, and that's why it never sticks with producers because, we're not musically trained to look at a keyboard. We're producing sideways, and this is why it never translates because people just tell you to memorize stuff. But if we start at B and then we skip every other scale degree here, we have B, D, F, and this is a different format. This is not a major or minor triad. It's actually equidistant notes. And the way I know this is diminished is because diminished chords have a chord code of 0, 3, 6. So if you start here at the root note, count up 3 notes, 1, 2, 3, count up another 3 notes, 1, 2, 3. That's called a diminished chord. And this is one of the most tense chords because if you count from the bottom note to the top note of just this diminished triad, these are separated by 6 notes. And the reason this is so important is because in music theory, the furthest you can go from one note to the other note is 6 notes. So quite literally, this is the polarity of music. This is the strongest distance you can get from one note to the next. This is why it sounds so tense. So I'll let you guys hear what it sounds like by default without revoicing this chord. And then we can come back down to C major in this case. Okay, so we can do things to make this sound more appealing because right now it's just kind of bland voicing and bland just bland. Okay, so let me show you guys how to turn this up. Okay, so let's take this diminished chord. Let's make this a seventh. So it's going to be 0, 3, 6 is the triad for the diminished chord. But what happens if we extend this chord? So instead of just using 0, 3, and 6, let's add another 3 notes, because again, what makes it diminish is these equidistant notes of 3. It's just adding 3 notes in between. So it's 1, 2, 3, add a note, 1, 2, 3, add a note, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let's hear what this sounds like. Okay, and nextly we need to ask, where's the ear trying to go? Because usually speaking, when you create chords in harmony, our ear listens to the top note of the chord progression. So we're listening to this. Whoa, sorry, y'all. My ear wants to hear B. So what we can do is raise up the seventh up an octave. And now we have a more complete feeling. But if I didn't raise that B, it just doesn't feel right. Okay, so this is where what's called chord voicing comes into play. Moving the notes around. We have more thunder. I need you guys to smash that like button. Now also playing style comes into play. So in FL, you can add what's called strum tools. I'm just gonna give you guys a couple tools. I don't wanna like belabor this point because it's not that important. Let's hit Alt S and just add a little strum. Sometimes it makes it more realistic, but sometimes it, just depends on how stuff is played. Because in real life, I'm not strumming every single chord. I'm not strumming this. Okay, so I didn't strum that except for the last chord. Okay, so that is your first chord progression. The formula here is just simply adding 3 scale degrees from wherever you are within the chord. So let's move away from scale. So let's say you're like, I'm still confused. That didn't make any sense. I need more definition. Again, you can go to busyworksbeats.com because in our music theory bundle, we cover it step by step all the way up. For this video, however, I got to give you guys a different system, which is the system I discovered. And I discovered this quick story was I was in university studying biology and pre-med specifically. And I had one class with Michael Hollinger, shout out to him. And it was about songwriting and just songwriting. I think it was called music theory and songwriting, but pretty much it was just songwriting. And it was my only music course I've ever taken in life because I didn't grow up in band. I didn't grow up, I did play saxophone in 4th grade, never practiced. I did play the recorder like in 3rd grade, and I did do something else. I had probably a couple keyboards when I was like 12 or something, or 14, but I never really got into music for real. And so this is my first foyer, as they say, into music theory. And it taught me the staffs, it taught me all this stuff. But the problem was it did not translate to FL Studio. It didn't translate to modern day DAWs, because when I went to play a chord, I typed in 1, 3, 5, and I played it just like this. Let me show you guys the screen. So I played it as if, I was playing the chord code system, which is 1, and then I would count up the notes. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I played these notes together and I was like, this doesn't give me the major chord that I'm used to, because I wasn't playing the actual major triad. I was playing a different version. And that's because I confused the staff or the scale degrees with integer notation, which is what I teach, called chord codes. So long story short, I banged my head up against the wall. And when I was sound designing on this plugin called Sylenth 1, you can't enter major third, minor third. You have to enter numbers to create chord stacks. Let me just show you guys what I'm talking about, because this might not make sense for all the people who are using synth. This was like a big synth back then. Okay, so here's the original synth. Now, back then we would sound design with this tool. It was one of the kind of premier tools. And I'm just going to give you guys, my point of view from back then and how I discovered chord codes. Because again, I would play like 1, okay, and I would count up my keyboard, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it never sounded like a major chord. It just sounded like mud. So in here, you had to use what are called note values. And here, it's a little tiny here, but if I, turn this voice up, it's called, and basically play a different, you hear that second tone? Okay, so to create a chord, you have to go 0, 4, and then I have to go to part B here. Now I'm just showing you guys the history of how I found this system, just so you guys understand that like this is founded out of heartache and frustration. Okay, so here we're gonna add the notes. So it's 0, 4, 7, and then let's add an octave, which is 1. This is plus 12, minus 1 is 11. So we have 0, 4, 7, 11. This should make the major 7th chord. So now I'm playing one key and it's playing all those notes. And now we have a house chord, and this is how it applies to EDM DJs as well. So let's, apply these filters in just to give it more movement. All right, so that's how I discovered the chord codes, because of sound design. And that's why the system is so powerful, is because I can bypass a scale. I can go straight to my intent, which is to make a very specific chord type. And I can create that chord type without thinking about which scale I'm in, where I'm at. And this is the power of chord codes. So chord codes, I want to make a very big difference. It's different than scale degrees. Scale degrees, we say the suffix. So if you say the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, those are called scale degrees. In chord code language, I'll say, we just say the number for what it is. Let me show you guys a little bit of magic here. So let's say I want to make a minor ninth chord. The chord code is 0, 3, 7, 10, 14. So 0, again, is where you start. And then you just count up your keyboard note by note. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Gives you the minor chord just like that. The minor ninth chord. Now, let's say I want to move to an exotic chord, like a dominant, ninth chord with a sharp 5 and a sharp 9. Okay, so even if I knew the music theory, you still have to understand how to convert that into number for what we do. So here I'm going to go to what's called, and now we're going to transition into tonic dominant conversation, just how powerful this is. So every note that you guys use, every chord, has a very strong opposite. Remember, I talked about the polarity, meaning, you have one note and then you have another note 6 notes away, and that's the strongest pull you can get between the notes. So every chord has another chord that just pulls that and creates that tension. And tension is what gives it that R&B sound. Let me lower the volume here. I realized why when I played it was so loud. Okay, so for example, I can play this chord here, which is a D minor ninth chord. And then I can go to what's called the A dominant chord, which I'll show you guys in a second here, to create that tension to move back to D. So even if you didn't want to add 1,000 chords in your song, okay, now we can move to the A dominant chord. See how much tension that creates? So it pulls you, and then you can let the rubber band back to the tonic. So I'm going to show you guys a 2-chord system. All you really need to know are these 2 chords. Every other chord is really just a movement style chord. But when you understand the tonic to dominant relationship, you'll understand how to really pull people to create that tension that we need in our ear. And that's what gives it that R&B, that soul sound. So let me show you guys the shortcut. So here we have the D minor ninth chord. Now, again, what gives it this vibe is because we have more notes. But what I'm going to show you guys here is how to get to the dominant chord. So firstly, we're going to start here at the tonic and then count up 7 notes. So we're going to take the tonic, count up 7 notes. This creates what's called the perfect fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In short, the perfect fifth always wants to resolve back to the tonic. It's just the nature of the sound. Okay. So now we're going to take this note here and we're going to create what's called a dominant chord. Now, dominant chords, you don't have to follow a scale for this. I'm just going to give you guys the philosophy about it. So basically, it's a major triad. So we're going to count 0. Remember, major is 0, 4, 7. And again, I have a chord code chart you can download straight to your phone as a reference. Just go to busyworksbeats.com, sign up for free, go to free downloads and look for where it says charts. And then there's a chord code chart in there. Here we have, the tonic. We're going to count up to 4, so 0, 4, 7 to create this triad. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7. This creates the major triad. Now, what makes the dominant chord dominant is because you have a blend of a major chord and a minor chord. So instead of the major 7th, which is 0, 4, 7, 11, let me map that out for you guys. So it'd be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That will be a normal expected chord. What we're going to do is actually pull this 11 down to 10. So it's 0, 4, 7, 10. And I'm trying not to go so deep into music theory, but what we're doing is basically adding the minor seventh over top of a major triad. Okay, that's the definition of what we're doing here. And it also creates what's called a diminished chord. And this is another reason why this chord is so tense. Okay, now to make it more lush, we can even add another note here. Same way we have a 5-note chord here, we could add another note here because we only have 4 notes. So far, the chord code is 0, 4, 7, 10. But now the chord code is 0, 4, 7, 10, 14. Okay, so let's count up 4 more. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this is what we call normal voicing, meaning the boring voicing. Sometimes it could work depending on the genre and the context, but for me, it just sounds bland and boring. And again, sometimes it works. It just depends. Now we can analyze this, like why does it work? It's because you go up a half step. Half steps want to resolve to back down a half step. What is a half step? 1 note. So this note goes up 1 note and it wants to come back down 1 note. Okay, so we can get, philosophical about why this is so, tense. But again, it really comes down to this diminished chord here because it's 6 notes in between. Okay, now I'm going to show you guys something I learned from Jazz Theory, a book I read on jazz theory harmony. And basically we could think of it this way, and I'll kind of simplify because I teach all this in my courses, but think of the tonic and the perfect fifth, which are 7 notes away. Think of these as like tonal twins. Okay, so the same way a major scale can have a minor scale, the polarity of that. Think of the tonic and the perfect fifth being like twins in a sense, where one twin wants to do what the other twin does. Okay, tonally speaking. And so these usually move in the same direction at the same time, usually. Now the same thing with the third and the seventh. Let me show you guys something real fast. This is a little esoteric secret. All right, so basically every tonic note, if you count up 7 notes, you get a perfect fifth. So let's count up. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3. Sorry, I had to grab the garage for my family there. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That creates the perfect fifth in the tonic separation. Now, what happens if we count the distance between what's called the third and the seventh? This is also, I'm out of breath, y'all. This is also 7 notes away. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that's the magic, is when you understand that what separates the major from the minor is basically the difference of these 2 notes, these tonal twins, I'll call them. Okay, from the third and the seventh, those are tonal twins, and so is the tonic and the fifth. But also too, if you count from the fifth up 7 more notes, you get the ninth, which is a perfect fifth away. All this to say, these notes act very similar, okay, in the chord, and so do these notes. They act very similar. They move in the same way. Okay, so that's my... So here we're going to actually sharpen or raise up 1 note, the perfect fifth and the ninth. Why? Because they act in the same way. Okay, so let's hit shift up. Okay, so now all we got to do is just pull it in the right octave, because this is a very jazz technique, usually good in the lower octaves. See how it just perfectly resolves? So once you guys truly comprehend how important it is between these dominant chords and that tonic chord, you'll understand how to move to any key. I'm literally going to go out of key on purpose here. Let's say I want to go to a different key. Let's try E and A. So I'm going to literally copy this over to where I'm literally going out of key here. Actually, let's do it this way. Let's start at D again, then go out of key. So now we're going to a whole different universe here. Let's pull this down though. Okay, so we went from D minor as the home chord to A minor. Now, how does that work? It's because this dominant chord always wants to come back to the tonic chord. So I can literally just do this for any key. Let me show you guys some examples here. Whoa, sorry, y'all. Forgot this is super loud. Let me turn this back down. Okay, so let's say I want to go from the tonic of B minor, playing the ninth chord here. Let's play a little bit deeper. Okay, so this is B minor ninth. Let's go to the dominant chord, G flat in this case, and then back to B. Now let's say I want to go out of key. Okay, now usually you want to use keys that are close to each other in terms of like the relationship of notes. I'm literally going to freestyle this and go from E to A. So here we're at B. You don't need to memorize this part, guys. So I literally went out of key just then. Let's do it again. Okay, so nobody can stop you from going out of key. I know people are like, how do I stay in key and get that arm? You don't have to be in key. That's why I don't like the scale approach to music so much, because it just becomes an indoctrination that I think holds you guys back. Okay, so I'm just showing you guys the stuff you can get into when you truly comprehend that dominant to tonic relationship. All right, so let's cover these points. I don't want to go too deep into music theory because we can really get lost in the sauce here. Let's talk about the 4 components here. So this is really simple. If anybody overcomplicates this or, teaches you guys this, they probably got it from me. Okay, so it's the top line, the harmony. Okay, so the harmony section is our glue to the track. This is usually our chords. The contrast section is the bass and the counter melody. Then we have the rhythm section. Now, any of these 4 components can be in each sound. Like, for example, I could play a minor chord and I can play rhythmically. Okay, so now it's both a harmony and a rhythm section. Or I could play a chord with the bass in it, and now I have a contrast layer because I have that bass in there. So now I'm playing not only the harmony, I'm also playing the contrast layer. Okay, now what if I play rhythmically with the contrast and the chord? So now we're playing the harmony, the bass, aka the contrast, and the rhythm section. So that's 3 components in one. Where people make the mistake is they'll add too much of one component to their track and they're wondering why their track just sounds off. Okay, so we can get deeper with this because this is easily a 30-minute lesson, but I'll just shorten it by demonstrating to you guys here. Let's start with the grand piano because this one is the easiest to write with. Let's go to song mode here. Let's record our chords with the bass. I'll show you guys the notes I'm playing just so you can understand here. So I'm playing D in the bass, and I'm playing what's called a D minor triad up 2 octaves from that point. I'll switch it up by taking what's called the third and dropping it down to F. So F to E, that's all I'm doing. That's all I'm doing there. Okay, so I'm playing the bass and a chord. So let's record this in. And this is 90% of the trap sound. Is that minor chord, so a suspended second chord. Let's switch keys here. Let's go to A. Now, how do I know to go to A? Because A is the perfect fifth of D. It's 7 notes up from D. Now we can get fancy and add that dominant chord. Okay, so I'll just record a couple more. Again, chord up top, triad, and then the bass in the bottom. Let's switch to A now. And then we'll do that dominant chord. Okay, and that's where you can get really crazy with it. So we went with 32 bars, that's a lot. Okay, so this is what it looks like visually speaking, but I told you guys what we're actually playing. It looks more complicated than what, than we actually played. So now we need to organize. What have we just created? We've created the harmony section. We've created, which is this part here, the chord, and we've also created a bass area, which is the contrast. So we've covered the harmony and the contrast. Okay, now there's two other areas we could add stuff to this. We could do a top line. The top line is usually one octave higher than your highest note of your chords. So in this case, we're gonna start, it's not a rule, but generally speaking, the way the ear works, it differentiates in terms of octaves. Okay, so here we have A, and then we can go up to start our melody here. Okay, so I just freestyled that, and the goal here with melody, there's a lot more about melody. We teach this at busyworksbeats.com. Look at the music theory bundle. It's too much to cover in this 40-minute video, but we're just going up the scale here, all the white notes. And then the row repeat. So there's a lot that went into this. I just don't have the time to explain it. Basically, we went from the root note, we went up and down the scale, and then we went to the perfect fifth to create that change up that you guys heard during the second half. So we went from the root note up 7 notes to the perfect fifth, and then we just went up and down the scale from that point. So let's hear it all together. Okay, now if we wanted to be fancy, we could even transpose this. But before we start getting into all the language here, let's start separating these layers so you guys can visually see how to arrange. And again, we could cover a lot in this video, but I just don't have 4 hours to sit here and teach everything about everything. So here we're going to go to the top line. We're going to add that in. Now let's separate out our contrast layer. Now I'm doing this just for visual purposes, but keep in mind if you guys have what's called aftertouch, you know, and really advanced MIDI controllers, sometimes you don't always want to separate this stuff because you have recorded modulation. That is a way more advanced conversation. Okay, so let's just take these bottom notes here, cut these out, and move them to a different pattern here in this case. So let's go to pattern 5, paste this in. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because, again, when most people, they have everything in one pattern. And the reason they can't arrange is because you have no puzzle pieces to move around. Now we have 3 puzzle pieces out of that one pattern. So now if I'm getting bored of the top line, or if something needs to change, I could just change the top line. Or if I want to take away the top line, which is, going to take away from the main song, we could just take it out. Okay, and that's how you guys arrange, is you just need more puzzle pieces. So what is the rhythm section in this case? Drums. Most of the time. Let's just add some drums in here. Now, these aren't like meant for this track, but let's just see if this works. We'll time stretch these drums. Okay, see how the groove of the drums is not matching the rhythm of the top line? And this is where most people don't realize they have rhythmic mismatch. See how that rhythm's not matching at all? Okay, so if I were to compose truly, I would have that rhythm established first, or find a rhythm that matches. Let's see if we get lucky and find a rhythm that matches that timing I played, which was a little bit. This one works better. It's not a perfect rhythm for this, but you guys get the concept. Now what we can do here is also change the key. Now this is an FL Studio thing, so from this point on it's really just FL Studio. Let's hit Control G, group all these notes into one pattern, and we could transpose this. So we can right click, transpose this. This is just to get ideas. I like to transpose up and down up and down 3 semitones, which will change the entire key. So places to check: -3, -1, +3. Those are my checking points. Now we're in a whole different key. Now I like the tone because it's dark. If it's that like dark Griselda vibe, let's pitch this back up 6 semitones. So now we're +3 from the original. This is good for soul genres. Pitching up 3 semitones. That's a cool tone too, but let's just pull it back to the original. So now we're gonna go -3, and then we're back to where we started. Okay, so that is that. Let's try to bring back the original patterns I had here, just so everything is mapped out the way I had it before. So we have top line, contrast, and the harmony. You guys will get the project files for free. Don't worry about trying to memorize all this stuff. Just go to busyworksbeats.com. Okay, so nextly, what I need to cover, let's map out the A natural minor scale here. It's all the white notes starting from A, but instead of playing the chords from A, we're gonna start from a different point, and this is called the modal mixture that you guys can create. I'll be short about modes because we cover this deeply in our, music theory courses. Just go to busyworksbeats.com to see the music theory bundle. What I wanna show you guys is just a way to think about it. So instead of starting at A, what if we started at D? And then our ear's like, how do we get back to A? So we have D, and then we know we can go to dominant, pull it back to A. Okay, or we can figure out a way to go to the, I know I'm speaking music theory here. You can figure out how to go to the dominant of A, which is E dominant. And just do it that simply. Okay, but just starting at D gives you a different perception about where we're starting. Okay, so this is called the modal approach to a scale. In short, if I start all the white notes from A, it creates the A natural minor. If I start at B, this is called the Locrian mode. What is a mode? It's just a sequence of notes, so we call that a scale. What if we start at C? People claim there's different emotions for each thing, so I mean, to each his own, subjective there. So that would be the major scale or the Ionian mode. Then we start at D here, which is the Dorian mode. If we start at E, we get what's called the Phrygian mode. If we start at F, playing all the same notes as the A natural minor scale, we get the Lydian mode. If you start at G, it's called the Mixolydian. And then back to A, which is technically the Aeolian scale. Now, these were terms used back in the day, but they're basically just scales, okay? So you can derive more scales from a scale. That's why I said music theory goes so deep, but I can't cover everything about everything in this video. I just want you guys to understand you don't have to start at the root note of a scale. That was my point here. You could start at D, for example, and then let's move up to the E dominant chord so that we can resolve back to A tonic. Just that simple. Starting at D. And that's actually a more natural movement because the notes aren't that far apart. Just that simple. Okay, guys. So I know it sounds convoluted, but when you truly understand how important that dominant chord is to that tonic chord, especially in R&B and jazz, you will open up worlds of music theory because you're not worried about staying in a scale. Okay. So I showed you guys how to, use modes. Now let me show you a basic thing, but a more advanced thing. So there's something called tuning. Now, tuning is just, if I hit a note, what does it sound like? Now, if I change that value, let's say I pull it up to 445, it's not the same sound. It's actually different. So let me clone this so you guys can truly hear what this sounds like. To test this, what I'll do is I'll write, let me think. Let me write some chords for the first one. So we're going to write chords in 445 hertz. And on the second sound, we're going to write in the same exact scale, just at a different tuning, 440 hertz. Okay. Actually, here's what we'll do. We'll make them the same so you guys can hear what that sounds like. And then I'll change the tuning. That makes more sense. Okay. Let's record this in. I'm going to record some chords here. Okay, so it sounds normal. Okay, now let's see what happens if I had this top line on the second keyboard. Okay, so let me stay in key just so that doesn't throw you guys off. Okay, so let's just hear it all the way through. It's not supposed to be the next banger, but they feel cohesive. I'm playing fifths here if you guys are wondering. It's playing perfect fifths. And then we're gonna resolve this. Okay, so it sounds normal, right? Now I'm gonna trick you guys' ear by going to the piano and now tuning it so that it's not the same frequency. Now it's gonna sound out of key. Now to your ear, you might say it's a little detuned, but that's what detuning is when you separate the tuning of each note. Let's make it really hard. Really jarring of a difference. Now it feels out of key. You know, like something's off. Okay, so that's when you really start to hear it, is when you pull it about 10 hertz in difference. So what I'm trying to teach you here is, guys, when you change, every song is different in tuning. The same way you pick up a guitar, you don't just start playing the guitar. You pick a guitar up, you tune it first, and then you play the guitar. So the same thing with instruments and synths and all types of sounds. You got to make sure they're tuned. Most sounds are tuned to 440 hertz, not every sound. And if you guys sample, older records are not necessarily tuned to 440 hertz tuning. It could be 445, like a Drake song. It could be 432, like an old soul record. It could be 437. You know, it could be a random tuning. My point is, when you pick up that guitar, you got to tune it. So just understand, sometimes you're not out of key. You just need to tune your instruments. And there's different ways to tune. I don't want to make this video about tuning because that is a whole different concept. Lastly, what I want to give you guys is just a gem. And I'm not going to deeply explain this one because we are running way out of time here. There's a 7-note system. So anytime you guys want to make melodies, try this 7-note system. Okay, so we're going to start at a root note here. Okay, so let's call this the tonic. And let's count up 5 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is called the perfect fourth. They're 5 notes away from the tonic. Let's take the tonic note again, count up 7 notes this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is called the perfect fifth. They're 7 notes away from the tonic. Now from here, we can create deviation notes. I could take the perfect fifth, add a note above and below it. And then I could take the tonic, because remember, these are tonal twins, okay? I can add a note above it and below it because they act very similar, these two, because they're all 7 notes away from each other, okay? So we can use all these notes as almost like our own version of a scale. So let me just show you guys how quickly you can come up with melodies without overly thinking it, especially for trap. This is a really great concept. Usually speaking, we start at the tonic note here, and then we go up to the perfect fifth, usually speaking. And then we could use those half steps, meaning a note above or below, as like pivot points. And we're going to repeat this thing. Now what I'm going to do is make these notes shorter just so it's not eating up the entire screen. And I'm just literally going to show you. I'm not even going to listen to this melody. I'm just going to change notes, and I guarantee it's going to sound decent, okay? Because this always works all the time. Now, normally if you guys are pivoting to these, you know, the fourth or the flat fifth or the sharp fifth, usually it comes towards the end of something, okay? So that's why I'm changing these ending notes, because usually speaking, that's when the ear is most susceptible to a change. Okay, so let's add it flat, tonic, and then what else do we use here? So it works. It always works. And I'm going out of key many times here, by the way. Let's add a root note in the bass. You could do the same thing with the bass. Let's just add a little half step here. Let's pull this down an octave. Now you got yourself a Memphis banger just like that. Easy peasy, 7-note system. I'm telling you guys, I got the keys to music theory because I would bang my head against the rock until I would figure it out. And I'm like, oh, why didn't anybody explain it this way? Why are they talking in this like super esoteric language? If you guys truly want to walk through of music theory from beginner, like literally knowing nothing about music theory, which I showed you guys chord codes, to being a masterful jazz theory type of approach of a music producer, go to busyworksbeats.com, look for the music theory bundle. That is where I will guide you guys through not only the basics of chord codes, I'll show you guys traditional music theory like scale degrees, how to use modal interchange, how to even go from key to key without sounding like you're going out of key. Tuning, we cover all this stuff, how to create melodies specifically. Now, everybody wants to skip straight to melodies, but they skip over what's called chords and harmony. That's more important in my opinion, because from harmony, you derive melody. Okay, so that's why I focus so heavily on harmony. And then I also cover melodic stuff like I just showed you guys here. Okay, so if you guys want to go deep, 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 let me see how long this video is. This video has to be an hour. Okay, so all I want you guys to do is go to busyworksbeats.com, sign up for free, just to see what we have as far as free courses and free downloads. And then when you guys want to lock in, look for the music theory bundle. All right, guys, I'll leave a link below. Peace out, guys.